Hi, my name is Sam and today we're going to talk about the role of media in politics. I personally think that there should be less media involved in politics. It may be argued that media plays a positive role in politics because it keeps people informed. And although that may be true, media should be making sure that they're putting out reliable, accurate information in a non-biased manner. Today we're going to talk about some history of media, 3 factors that affect news coverage, media studies, and social media. So, to start, let's talk about history. According to PBS, in 1735, John Peter Zenger published articles in the New York Weekly Journal about Governor William Cosby. These articles were described as sarcastic, containing innuendos and allegory to ridicule the governor. Governor Cosby brought Zenger to trial because of these articles. The law states that if the articles are true, then Zenger would not be found guilty, which he wasn't. This led to Andrew Hamilton, Zenger's attorney, to write a brief narrative about the case that argued newspapers should be able to criticize the government as long as what they were saying was true. In 1791, the ratification of the Bill of Rights included the First Amendment stating the freedom of the press. In 1798, the Sedition Act made it a crime to print any false, scandalous, or malicious writing against the U.S. government. In the 1900s, the term muckrakers came about. This term was used to define people who investigate and reveal illegal and unsavory practices of capital, labor, state, and local government. Muckrakers would help with the era of reform. The progression of media went from newspapers to radio to television, and now we mostly use the internet and social media. Media has exposed many people in politics. As you can see, using media in politics can be tricky because of the information being provided. Because sometimes if it's not accurate, then people are getting misinformed. Next, we're going to talk about the 3 main factors that will affect news coverage. Here I'm going to show you some clips that will explain the first 2 factors. The first factor is going to be source of information.
The 3 main factors that affect news coverage in the thought bubble. The first factor influencing the news is the journalists who make it. Journalists are even more important than their bosses, the publishers, because they have the discretion to report and interpret the news. If you think the news is just the facts, then it's useful to remember that the New York Times slogan used to be, "All the news that's fit to print." Do reporters have a bias towards one political ideology or another? Probably. More journalists identify as liberal and as Democrats than say they are conservative or Republican. The next factor to consider is the source of political news, the politicians themselves. Politicians do a lot of things to create a positive media image for themselves, and this goes beyond shaking hands and kissing babies. They show up at important events, like opening day of the baseball season, or natural disasters, and make the most of these photo opportunities. They also cultivate relationships with reporters, because if a journalist likes you, they might be more likely to write something nice about you, or at least something less mean. One of the best ways to cultivate a good relationship with a journalist is by leaking information to them. A leak is a disclosure of confidential information to a journalist, and politicians can use them to cement relationships with news organizations and to make sure that a story is reported the way that they want it reported. Reporters have a hard time refusing a scoop, so if a politician gives insider information, they can usually influence the way the reporter will tell.
The second factor is press releases.
These are stories written by politicians, or more likely their staff, that are released to the press. Politicians hope that stories will be reported with minimal revisions, and they often are, especially since there's so much pressure for news organizations to put out content as quickly as possible. News organizations like them a lot because they lower the cost of producing information, but advocates of responsible journalism worry a lot about them because, coming directly from politicians, they're certain to be biased, and when they're reported as straight news, they can...
The final factor is consumers. This is important because the news wants people to read what they're writing, so they're likely to target a population and tailor the news to fit with what they want to hear. Considering that a lot of people that read the news are generally better educated, the news is not written for the entire population. A study conducted by Young-Hwan Kim looks at cross-sectional data showing the link between politically like-minded media use, political polarization, and political participation. This shows us that research can prove that consumers are a large factor that affects the news. Kim discusses how people who are looking for news tend to look at something that is in line with their beliefs and views that already exist. Like-minded media leads to polarization. This means that people reading the news that align with their beliefs will continue to gravitate towards that view because they are influenced in such a way. Another conclusion was media had a positive influence on the participation of people in politics. With that being said, this might only be because the media sources are telling people what to do. The difficulty with the media is that although people may be participating more or getting more information, media may not be telling their entire story. It's not showing all the points of view, which is something that's very important. Another more current way to show that media and politics are seen together is through social media. One great example of this is our president, Donald Trump, and his use of Twitter. Many of his tweets have been brought to attention because they can be viewed as unprofessional. One of his tweets say, "I wonder if I run for president, will the haters and losers vote for me, knowing that I will make America great again? I say they will." His choice words of haters and losers show a certain level of unprofessionalism. Although a politician may have many people that are fans of them, there should still be a level of respect. This tweet shows how he views people. Some of his other tweets include him saying things like, "Now that Adam Schiff is starting to blame President Obama for Russian meddling in his election, he is probably doing so as yet another excuse that the Democrats, led by their fearless leader, crooked Hillary Clinton, lost the 2016 election. But wasn't I a great candidate?" And he also wrote, "Remember, politicians are all talk and no action. Our country is a laughingstock that is going to hell. The lobbyists and donors control all." The latter quote is interesting considering he ran for president the following year. All of President Trump's tweets are very unfiltered, which as a politician portray a lack of respect and maturity. The use of social media gives yet another perspective on the lives of politicians and politics. By posting disrespectful things on Twitter, people might not like Trump because they see what he really feels and thinks. A study conducted by Zhang and Lin showed that social media can enhance engagement and have a positive effect on participation. Additionally, if social media is used recreationally, it can have a negative effect. The study concludes that this also might depend on who you're targeting. So for example, recreational use of social media may turn some people off and they don't want to participate, but it might also engage another group. I can agree with this because I know that some people find the tweets that our president makes to be really funny, while others might get really upset about them. It seems that currently a lot of people are getting their political information from social media. As discussed previously, social media can contain both reliable and non-reliable sources, making it difficult to know what to believe. An article written by Kevin Curry stated, according to a Pew Research Center survey conducted in January of 2016, 35% of respondents between the ages of 18 and 29 said that social media was the most helpful source of information about the presidential campaign. 35% might not sound like that many people, but it is a particular number of people that are relying on a source that might not actually be reliable. This causes these people to make statements or reasoning to back up their opinions that might not be true. As they always say, you can't always believe everything you hear, and I think this especially applies to the internet because anyone can write it. So as we can see, there's lots of research and examples that show the negative effects of social media and politics. Citizens need to make sure that they are getting their information from reliable sources. We also need to recognize that media really does play a large role in the influence of people. As we read in the studies before, lots of people tend to participate more because that's where they get their information. This can put a lot of pressure on politicians to make sure that they are maintaining an appropriate social media platform and watching what they do in the public eye, because one mistake can end their reputation. Because as you have probably seen on the news, there's just lots of things that get put on the news, and it involves lots of politicians' private lives. Although social media and politics might get more people involved in politics, it may not be the most accurate information. By providing and promoting non-biased, accurate information, we can properly inform citizens about what's going on in politics. And this is something that's super important so that we make sure that people are understanding different politicians and their views and not prying so much into their private life. Thank you.